Thank you, Nick, for a great presentation. Having worked on St Pancras in London for 5 or so years, seeing the transformation of that precinct was fantastic. So I do look forward to see what's in store for the central area. We now move on to our question and answer session. I think we'll stay with Nick for the first one. Nick, is office space required anymore? More people will continue to work from home. Is the size and scale of the upgrades in line with society post-COVID-19 lockdown?
I'd have to say, Paul, I'm sorry, I couldn't even hear that question.
Okay, sorry, start again. Is office space required anymore? More people will continue to work from home. Is the size and scale of the upgrades in line with society post-COVID-19 lockdown?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Look, the jury is still out, I think, on what the post-pandemic world looks like for people returning to office. There's lots of studies around the world. There's lots of ideas that are evolving. I would say, however, that Central Station, one of the things that will succeed in the longer term is well-located, well-activated, vibrant precincts that are well connected to transport. There is no better connection to transport than Central Precinct. So I think also in the longer term, the City of Sydney needs to move to the south. So we're providing the potential growth of the city, CBD, for activation. And finally, I suppose, there is not an urgent decision for government to make about committing funds to this project. We have a couple of years. And it was pointed out to me a while ago that after the pandemic of the early 20th century, the 1918, 1920, within 3 to 4 years, the world was completely back to normal and everybody had forgotten about that pandemic. So I think we have time to watch and monitor and make decision making as the return to office space evolves in the future.
Great, thank you. Over to Mike. You've talked about increasing the efficiency of the network. How does ARTC intend doing this?
Thanks, Paul. So ARTC has really focused, as I said in my presentation, on increasing the size of the network and the resilience and reliability of the network. And if you recall what I said on a number of the projects like Inland Rail, where we're providing that connectivity between the ports through the eastern side of Australia, where we'll be able to allow trains in 24 hours to go from Brisbane to Melbourne, double stacked, and really be a competitive solution. The other thing that we're doing with efficiency is the ATMS system that I spoke about before. That allows more trains and more reliable train journeys on our network. So, you know, building our network, building in things like ATMS and some of the other technologies I spoke about, that all helps the efficiency of the system and providing a resilient and reliable network to our customers around Australia.
Thank you. Staying with Mike, what advances in reducing emissions from ICE locomotives will ARTC seek, and will the climate change requirements force universal electrification of rail networks?
Sorry, just say that one again, Paul.
So, with advances in reducing emissions from ICE locomotives, will ARTC seek... Sorry, I'll start that one again. What advances in reducing emissions from ICE locomotives will ARTC seek? And will the climate change requirements force universal electrification of rail networks?
Very difficult question, Paul. We've started discussing, you know, what the network of the future looks like for the rail sector, in the freight sector, and we've been talking with some of our other peers in the industry. It's a journey we're on. It's a very hard question to answer, to be honest. I guess the efficiency of what I just mentioned with Inland Rail and getting more capacity on trains currently with our diesel locomotives helps reduce emissions. In the future, there could be other solutions with battery type locomotives, but there's a little way to go with that technology from what I understand.
Thank you. Back to Nicholas. Are there any specific sustainability initiatives being implemented across the programme?
Thanks, Paul. This is a major precinct, so we're dealing with 24 hectares. And the history of urban renewal precincts is there is great opportunity for precinct-wide utility initiatives. Both Barangaroo and Central Park had big initiatives in relation to power, heat and cooling, and water. We believe we have the same sort of opportunities at Central, and those precinct-wide implementation of precinct-wide utility initiatives have major benefits from a sustainability point of view. So we're currently looking at how best to deliver those. The issues of renewable is probably a little bit more conflicted. It's very difficult to see that we can see a lot of solar panels, for example. It's not a wide area. We certainly will be treating that as a serious component, but there's not a huge footprint potentially available for that. So we're still working up those initiatives. One of our big targets is to look at what should be the ambition of the project compared to what Barangaroo and Central Park were. And we would certainly see the net zero emissions goal as critical to this. We would expect any major urban renewal project now to seek to achieve that objective.
Thank you. And back to Mike. In terms of road versus rail freight, how do you think the competitiveness of rail freight can be improved?
Yeah, good question, Paul. As I covered in my presentation, inland rail is a really good example of how we can get cost-effective solutions with 1,800-metre long trains, double stacked, fast transit times. But the other part of the equation we need to solve is to the ports. And I mentioned Port Botany and Cabramatta. That's just one really good example of where we can get better connectivity into the ports and into the intermodal facilities like in Sydney at Moorebank. So the more we can get that connectivity, allow passing opportunities for our freight and passenger lines, and those longer journeys with bigger capacity, we can get some really competitive solutions. And not only from a competitive side of view, just think about the emissions, the safety involved in getting containers on rail versus road. There's a lot of other advantages just more than being competitive. So we're really on that journey, and when Cabramatta and Botany are finished, inland rail is finished, and the terminal connections are done, you'll really see a competitive solution for those freight numbers that I was talking about in the future.
Great, thank you. And one last question, which goes to Nicholas. What focus has been put into, and how are we enhancing customer experience at Central Station?
So I suppose at the moment, Central Station Terminal itself, when in a pre-COVID world, it had about 250, 270,000 customers and passengers passing through it each day. That will, in a couple of decades, making certain assumptions about return to work in a post-COVID world, will go up over to 400, 450,000. So the terminal itself needs to be significantly invigorated to prepare itself for both that increase in passenger numbers, plus its critical role at the front door of what we would call overstation development or the major state significant precinct. So we're spending a lot of work at the moment looking at how can we enhance and build on the excellent work of the Metro team, how can we enhance pedestrian circulation, wayfinding, and indeed opportunities for passengers and customers to dwell within the terminal building. One of the big trends internationally would be these main transport interchanges become a destination in their own right. At the moment, we don't see that with Central. Central is somewhere you pass through to access a train. We would like to create it more as a destination and build opportunities of retail, other support activities for it to become a destination in its own right. So that's a big focus of our work at the moment.
Fabulous, thank you. And that is now the end of the Q&A, and I'd like to say a big thank you to Nicholas and Mike for your presentations.